Hello my lovely floss tube friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing something a little different, as I'm sure you can see. I decided that on this glorious Friday morning I would spend half hour, 40 minutes just getting some extra love in on Evening in the Park, since as I'm gunning for the end of the year on this piece. So I thought I would do some filling in along this section here. And I thought, well, since as I'm sitting here stitching, I might as well show you what I'm doing at the same time. So we are working with, it's a Thread Gatherers silken colour thread in the colourway 152, which is blue cotton frocks. I wanted to share this with you because when I first started working with this, I was a bit confused, but it is what it is. When you first pull your strands from this, it sort of turns up a bit like this once you cut your length. And at first I was like, well, that's a bit odd because it always says 6 strands. This is not quite the same because it's a specialty thread, but I don't know if I can show you. See how that's naturally sort of unraveling its little self into two bigger chunks. Well, it will sort of do that, but then you don't end up with 6 strands. You end up with 4 in each of these little twizzles. So, as example, I've just pulled 2 strands just here. These are the 2 single strands of cotton, and the remainder on it is these 2 strands. So you can see if I pull that apart, that's the 2 strands that I haven't separated. So yeah, slightly different with some of these threads, but basically you'll end up with three sets that are wanting to divide. And you can see it's naturally doing it for me. So the way I separate these threads, because they can get a little bit tangly if we're not careful. So wherever it naturally looks like it wants to undo on a length, I will do like you would if you was actually going to separate a DMC thread. So I literally just hold this, slide this section out like so. I'm only doing this for those that don't know about this, because if you don't know, the first time I did this I got in a whole hot mess and ended up with a massive great knot in the middle. So that is like one of the main strands out of the main amount that I cut. And then if I bounce up and down on him, right, that's not the end that wants to separate. Whenever you get like what I call resistant end, I always go to the other end and just see which end looks like it wants to separate. But you can see now it's splitting again naturally into 2 more threads. There we go. And then you can easily see then that there's 2 strands here and there's 2 strands there. And then I will separate, I'll do exactly the same thing again. I will pull that and then separate those 2 strands and then put them back together, and then do exactly the same with that. But they sort of unravel naturally in their sets of 2, believe it or not. It just naturally does it. Look, you can see it's doing it for itself. But I thought I'd share that because for anyone that's never worked with silken colours before, or particularly the cottons, if like me you didn't know that that's what it did, you get yourself in rather a hot mess. Well, I did anyway. It doesn't take a lot. Right, okay, so I've separated my strands and then put them back together. And now I'm going to try and thread a needle. There we go. Okay, so let me zoom the camera out a little bit so that you can see. Okay, this is harder than it seems. I'm trying to find a good angle. This is one of the reasons that I don't very often, very rarely have I done a stitch with me whilst working on Evening in the Park, because it's on such a big frame and because of where I'm sat, it can be a little tricky to get the camera angle just so on this setup, because I'm in the living room. My husband's not long come home off nights, so he's gone off to bed. I've got to start work in about 45 minutes. So I thought, you know what, this is like a rarity, absolute rarity, to be able to sit here and stitch quietly and peacefully without any comings and goings from the living room. So I thought, well, I'm going to sit and do some stitching. And I was like, why not record it? Which sounded like such a great idea. And then it took me ages to set this up. So I'm sort of running against the clock now on time. But we will see how we get on. Now, I'm not sure if you've got enough light there. Let me see if I can bring another light in without bashing everything. Oh, like that. See, that was what we didn't want to do. That might be a bit better. Okay. We're off and rolling, people. So I am gunning to get this done, I'll be honest with you. Now that I'm really sort of spending a lot more of my actual time stitching on Evening in the Park instead of just looking at it and admiring it from a distance. I'm actually thoroughly enjoying working on it. And I'm being very good. I'm leaving it out on the frame so that whenever I come in from work, if I do fancy doing a strand or two, to be honest, there's been some nights that I've come in this week, thought, it'd be nice to get a strand or two on it, and it just hasn't happened. All the best will in the world, and it still hasn't happened. But whereas normally I'd be like, oh, I might as well put it away because I don't want it being left out. It's not being worked on at the moment. Put it away. And then that's when I then turn to other things and start stitching on other things whenever I do get a chance. I'm not doing that. I'm persevering. I'm leaving it out. It's like it's Evening in the Park or it's nothing. And by doing that, even if I've not really felt much like stitching, the beauty is I've got to a bit in this where there's lots of bits and pieces that are waiting to be finished. So I'm going to go over here now. So obviously I've got lots of filling in stitching. So all of this that I'm working on now, this is all my filling in stitching. So this is what I can sort of consider to be not mindless stitching, because you still need to pay attention to what you're doing. But it's the type of stitching that doesn't really require too much brain power on my part. But then I've got other areas where obviously we've just finished doing bits and pieces elsewhere that do require brain power and a nice peaceful quiet house. So I save those bits for whenever it's like the weekend and I get sort of an hour or so without the entire family hanging out with me. And then I will sit and do the bits that require a little bit more concentration on my part. But because I've got to the point now where I've got areas which can be worked on but not necessarily concentrated on, I'm sort of getting bits and pieces done on it. But given that where are we? What is today? The 15th of November. You know when you're like, is it achievable, she says. Is it achievable? Now, bearing in mind, I haven't said it needs to be done by Christmas. It needs to be done by the end of the year. So, although I am working between Christmas and New Year, there's still a fair amount of days that I do have available, and hopefully chilling, not doing much, where I might actually get some hours of stitching on it. I mean, I always say that and then jinx myself, because inevitably something comes up, whether it be, again, we're at that point of the season. It's seasonable. It's, shopping, food shopping, festivities, house decorating. Yeah. In fact, I think that might be a job for this weekend. This weekend we may have to get the Christmas tree out. I don't go crazy in my house with Christmas decorations, but I do like my Christmas trees. So it would be nice to get the Christmas trees up this weekend. But I'm not doing hard and fast rules. If it goes up, it goes up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I've got a few work from home days next week. So as a worst case scenario, I could always say to hubby, right, well, if you get everything out, just leave it in a pile somewhere. I can crack on and do it as and when I get an opportunity to, whenever that may be. So as you can see, this stitches up beautifully. But because it's a variegated thread, you can't just, do all the first legs and then come back and do all the second legs. I'm having to do them individual stitches, which is what takes the time on this. I honestly thought when I was looking at sort of these areas that I'm stitching on now, these bits, that it would be like, it would be a done deal. It would be done in there's 10 minutes worth of stitching there, and maybe half hour there. But because I'm having to work individual stitches one at a time, I actually stitch slower. I didn't think I would. But ever since I've started working more on these variegated threads, it became very apparent that is the case, that I stitch slower when I'm stitching individual stitches like this. I'm much faster when I do all the bottom legs and then come back and do all the top legs. But arguably there's a lot of people that are a lot faster stitchers than me, because I double push. I had it pointed out to me on a video once, and ever since then I've not been able to unsee it. So whoever that was, thanks very much. Because I was like, I don't understand why I stitch so slow. And they're like, oh, it's because you waste your time with the double push. I'm like, double push? Then I had to sit and watch back one of my stitch with me's, and I'm like, oh, look, I do double push. And ever since then, that's all I see when I see myself stitching, is the fact that I double push. Now you're wondering, what does she mean by double push? What is double pushing? Let me give you an example. So, I don't know how close we are. How close are we on the camera? I can't see. I can't see where you are. No, I leave it where it is, because I can't see where what you can see and what you can't see. So, double push, she says. So you can see I'm bringing my needle up here, and then when I push it back down here, I push it to that point and then pull it through. But then when I do this bit, I sort of poke it through, but then I take my finger off, and then I push again. So I double push. I double push the needle. Instead of doing, let me see if I, do you know what, I've tried to sort of stop myself from doing it to see if it makes it any faster. It just slows me down. So what other people tend to do is they'll push and then from the back just pull straight through. And then push. See, now I don't double push when I'm bringing it up, but I do when I'm going down. But most people would just push and then pull like that. But for some bizarre reason, whenever I consciously try, you'll see what I mean. Here I do it, look. I consciously try not to do it, I do it because it's the most comfortable way for me to stitch. And at the end of the day, it's about what works for me and it's about what's comfortable for me. So for me to sit here and try and train myself, she says, not to double push, it's like, well, if that's how I've learned and that's how I'm most comfortable, and I find that by trying not to double push actually slows me down even more. I'm like, I'll double push all the way. I don't mind. I accept that I'm a slow stitcher in comparison to others, if that be the case. But yeah, I never even knew that I did it. And as you can see, I don't really follow any patterns when it comes to this filling in. I just go wherever my thread will take me. But I'm thoroughly, you know, I don't know if you've ever got to a point when you're working on one of these big projects like this, you start off all big guns, don't you? You're like, oh, I love working on it, and you want to stitch on nothing other than that. Then you get to a point where it's like, oh, I feel like I'm burnt out on this one. So then you put it away. Then every now and then it'll come back out and it'll reignite you. It'll remind you why you wanted to stitch it in the first place, because you absolutely loved it. And then as time goes on, you sort of, I do, I lose that. And then when I feel like I'm getting burnt out on it again, I'll put it away. But then I'm sort of very reluctant to get it back out. And I think that's sort of what happened on this one. And then once I got it out and, you know, you're sitting there thinking, well, you know, there's still so much to go. It's a bit like a full coverage. It's like, although I want to get it out, it's like, you know, I stitch on it, but it doesn't even make a dent. But then when you sort of just keep plodding on and you're doing bits and pieces at a time, when all of a sudden you get to a point where like you're starting to see it, if you like, come into the end, or you see light at the end of the tunnel, it gives you another kick to just crack on. And that's sort of where I'm at the moment with this. I'm on like oh, it's so close. So it's sort of spurred me on to sort of want to be stitching on this all the time again. Hang on, let me just move my threads out the way so we can finish this. So yeah, other way, Teresa. Just spin you over, people. So at the moment, I'm all about the Chatelaine because I see light at the end of the tunnel. Always helpful. Now, I know I've just given you a bird's eye view of the back. I do apologise for my messy back. And it is a messy back, I'll give you that. It is a messy back, but I don't care. I don't care about the back. Once that's in its frame, no one's... Oh, I've just hit the camera again, sorry. No one's ever going to see it again. All right, separate my threads. I'm like, I don't want to leave all of these what do we call them? Not boring bits, because none of this is boring, but the filling in stitching, like the mindless stitching, I don't want to leave too much of that to do, because otherwise I could end up with getting to the situation where I get all of the more intense parts completed and then sort of feel like I'm bogged down with the monotonous stitching at the end, and then it sort of slows me back down again. I don't want to end up in that situation. So I'm making sure that there's not a lot of any one thing left to do if I can help it. Obviously barring the beading, because there's a fair amount. Although I say that, all the middle, the main bit which had most of the beads in, I would arguably say, that's all done. There's a few bits and pieces. Someone pointed out in my my latest update video when I was sharing where I'd gotten to with Evening in the Park, and I sort of showed the whole thing. So many people were just like, oh, Teresa, this is where you've gone wrong on the lantern. And then someone pointed out, so, Teresa, you do realise in the top right-hand corner that you haven't completed all the snow. Yes, I know. When I sit there and say this is all done and I've just got all this to do, there are bits and pieces that I'm aware that I've not done. I will double check. So for those of you that are panicking that I haven't seen areas where there might be a few stitches missing, or I will do like a final check. And when I do my final check, I'll make sure to say on FlossTube, this is the final check. So if you see something that I'm not seeing, let me know. But loads of people, it does make me laugh, because I sit and look at this in the flesh. In the flesh, I'm up close and personal with it. And there are times that how you even can tell from the end of a video where there's, you know, some snow flurries missing, those types of things, I have no idea how you do that, because I'm like, I just look at it as a whole and go, oh, look, it looks beautiful. Yet people that watch the videos, they must have such eye for detail, because I mean, you could never tell from this bit here where I'm doing the snow. Basically, in the top right-hand corner, I've done what would equivalently be this bit, like the main bit of snow. These little odd random snowy bits here, I've basically just not gone in and finished for whatever reason. They're the sorts of bits that people see. I mean, and bearing in mind, it's not like I did, you know, a close-up. I mean, I know I do a close-up, but not massive close-up, is it? It's more sort of, you know, you'll see the close-up of a corner or the part that I'm working on, and then I hold it back and show you like the whole piece. And yeah, I must say, you've all got an eye for the detail, people. All got an eye for the detail, but because I suppose I look at it all the time, I look at it as a whole, as a general, rather than you know, look at the top left, look at the top, you know, the bottom right. I don't do that. But I will do before I officially say that this is complete. I will double check. And of course, I invite my FlossTube friends and community that when the video comes, when, she says, when the video comes, that I can say to you, I'm done. I'm done. It's, you know, it's prepared for the framers. When I get to there, hopefully I will be doing a close-up and personal with it. And when I do that, if you then see anything that's missing, be sure to let me know, because yeah, I know I've seen various people, FlossTube, at retreats where you talk to people and they're like, I didn't see it until after it was in a frame. that they'd forgotten a bit, or they'd missed a bit, or there was like, one bit missing. And once you see it, you don't unsee it again, do you? That's the problem. It's once you've seen it, there's no going back. Or if someone points it out, that's even worse, when someone points it out to you that you've gone wrong. Luckily for me, on this, there's always an option to go back and make whatever changes or fill in any bits that are missing. I won't be taking this to the framers straight away. I will want to, but I won't be taking it straight to a framers, because I want to make sure that I can get some good footage of it close up, but not behind glass. So I will be sure to share the final stitched piece with you all, with plenty of time before it's going to get put behind glass. So if any of you see anything wrong with it, or stitches missing, if I've done stitches wrong, I don't care, because if I haven't seen it by that point, then it can just stay like it. But if you see any bits that are missing that I haven't done, feel free to let me know. But I will try and do like a final sweep of this before I declare it finished. But it's going to be, if I can get this done, what a feeling that's going to be. 8 years in the making, this is. 8 years in the making, and we're getting so close. So close to that point where it's nearly done. Beautiful feeling. But I must admit, when it's done, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'll be happy to have this hanging up somewhere nice in my house. Happy. More than happy. But that said, it will feel a bit strange not stitching on this one. Very strange indeed. Right, I'm just looking at the time. What is the time? It's time for me to go and do some work, people. I think I'm going to have to call it. Now, I have no idea what the light's like on this video, because I was sort of balancing everything precariously. So if the light hasn't been very good, it will be a lessons learnt for next time. Like I say, this is a bit of a new temporary type test setup to see whether it was working, and to see whether I can take you along with me on the final journeys of the evening in the park Chatelaine. So if the lighting is not very good on this particular video, when I next do a stitch with me on this, which I will try and do, now that we're getting close to an end and we're getting close to a finish, I would like to try to do that. Ideally when I'm doing this corner, because I know that a lot of people were really keen to see how intricate the specialty stitches are, and, actually completing the corners, rather than just sort of this random, just filling in stitching. I might try and do some stitch with me's whilst I'm doing those bits, because that way at least people get an idea of exactly what's involved in some of these. And it's not as hard as it looks. It may appear intimidating, but it really isn't as bad as you think it might be. So if I can do it, this is me. This is me who, not so long ago, I say not so long ago, it was probably longer than I think now. What was it, 8? No, it's more than 8 years ago. 10 years ago when I first joined FlossTube, somewhere around there. And the only thing that I did was full coverage, because I didn't think I was capable of doing anything else, remember? It's like, I can only do little X's. because I'm not a stitcher as such, or I'm just learning. Look at me now. Look at what you can achieve when you just sort of don't worry so much about what you think you can or can't do, because it's reading instructions, taking time out when you need it. Do some little test stitches on a scrap of fabric if you need to. Not that I ever did. Because my answer is, well, I can always unpick it and pull it back out and start again. And that's exactly what I've done for most things. I don't tend to, unless it's a really, really complicated specialty stitch where I didn't even understand the instructions. At that point, I'll get a bit of scrap even weave in the same count as what I'm working on. And I will just do a couple of test stitches of that particular stitch. Once I've got my head around it and it sort of looks like what the diagram looks like. Because that's the thing, you even get a diagram. It gives you a diagram and normally shows you which way round you stitch the stitch. So as long as my stitch then looks like what it's supposed to look like, or fairly like, I'll accept that. I'm not a perfectionist, people. Not when it comes to my stitching. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love to be perfect, but the reality is, if it means that I never get anything done because it's never perfect enough, then no, most definitely not. It'll be unique to me. Right, there we go, people. I think I'm going to call it. Let me zoom you out. There we go. So that's where we've got to. I'm not quite sure how long this video is going to be, but I don't think we did too bad. We got from there to there. That's sort of like half again, and then we've done that whole side. That's what I like about this sort of stitching. You can just go in and fill in, and it does make a huge difference when you get these stitches in versus this bit here where it's not in. So there we go. We're just a few more steps closer, people, to a finish on the evening in the park. Well, I hope I've kept you occupied, and I hope you've been doing your stitching alongside me. I'll be back again for some more evening in the park stitch with me's. It's just making sure that I've got the right setup and having some peace and quiet in the house, as always. So I'm going to head off because I need to go and start some work. Yeah, seeing as it's Friday, I will say have a lovely weekend all. And until next time, bye-bye for now.